What happens in the sky affects life down here on Earth. The celestial compass shows you how and guides your way with astrology you can use from professional astrologer Kathy Beal. Every episode features her light-hearted, practical forecasts and navigational tips, blended with humor, optimism, and a love of patterns, symbolism, and pop culture references. Kathy translates technicalities into concepts that apply to real life. You'll learn how the current moment ties to where we've been, from the recent past to cycles that last happened years ago, and get a look at where we're heading. And much more, from special topics to special guests. The Celestial Compass, enlightening, entertaining, and empowering. Here's your host, Kathy Beal.
Greetings, Earthlings. Welcome to Celestial Compass. I'm Kathy Beal of EmpowermentUnlimited.net, and we're going to start, as always, with a brief overview of what is going on this month. Remember, you can read the full forecast at omtimes.com and my site, EmpowermentUnlimited.net. We're entering our first full month with Saturn in Pisces, which it hasn't been in since the mid-90s, and Pluto in Aquarius, which none of us alive have experienced, at least in this lifetime. And we're getting a foretaste, a look. We're at the doorway of what things are going to be like into the 2040s. This is a month of a lot of excitement and activity. We're entering eclipse season as well. The first eclipse on the Aries-Libra axis, which is all about who you are as opposed to who you are with other people, the relationship axis. The first eclipse in that is the new moon towards the end of the month, actually on the 19th or 20th, depending on where you are, at the very end of Aries, setting this cycle off in a huge way. So this is a month where you will find yourself walking into territory that's different from what you've been experiencing, and it's that you will have the opportunities and probably the motivation to take some risks, to try some things you haven't done, and ultimately to find yourself being catapulted into an exciting new direction, at which point Mercury goes retrograde in Taurus, and we get to look at what's really going on down here on Earth. There's a Mercury retrograde guide at Om Times as well by me that I refer you to for that. And with that, I am very excited to move on to the main topic. I'm going to primarily talk about Saturn in Pisces and probably a whole lot more with a guest that I'm very honored to introduce to you, Frank Clifford, an astrologer, author, and principal of the London School of Astrology. He has been a consultant astrologer and palmist since 1989, and he teaches and writes about both subjects. He was honored with the Charles Harvey Award for Exceptional Service to Astrology in 2012, a Writing Award from ISAR in 2016, and a Regulus Award nomination in 2018. His dozen books include the Interpretation Manual, Getting to the Heart of Your Chart, and a Guide to Forecasting, the Solar Arc Handbook. Frank teaches astrology and palmistry online and in person, and his courses are also available in Chinese, Japanese, and Turkish. Welcome, Frank.
Thank you, Kathy. Yes, I think I was so bowled over by that intro, I probably cut the phone line down.
Well,
How
Uranus
you
in Taurus. I am doing great, and I'm thrilled you're here.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here. And yes, it's an exciting time, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I would like to go back in history for just 1 second, if you don't mind. Could you tell us how you came to astrology?
Well, I was very fortunate to be living in London. I still am. And I didn't quite realize when you're 16 years old, it was 1989, I was 16 years old, didn't realize how fortunate I was to be in London with so many amazing astrologers at my doorstep. And there was Liz Green teaching, Melanie Reinhardt. There were a whole range of amazing people. Now I realize how lucky I was. But back then also I went at the age of 16 to see an astrologer called Tad Mann. And he does a very different type of astrology from the regular natal chart readings that we're used to. And he sat me down, looked at my chart, and it was a full moon in August 1989, and I went home and I thought, I'm going to teach myself this subject. It's fascinating. And I never stopped learning. I adore the subject. It's one of those things where whatever you do, wherever you come from, whatever experience you have, you can apply that with astrology to have your particular worldview or particular approach to life. So it's incredibly versatile, and I was very lucky to have been introduced at such a young age.
That I certainly can resonate with that, and this comes through in your writing, that it's like a living, breathing approach to existence for you.
It has been. I mean, I love writing. Writing is hard work. I've done a lot of writing over the years for different magazines and different books, but it's. I also did a lot of sunshine columns for many years, and was very dismissive when I was invited to write one, and then realized and ended up having a tremendous amount of respect for the people that do it, because it's such hard work and it's such a discipline to write as well. So it's been a interesting learning curve, and it's, as I say, it's a subject that if you're passionate about, you can take it anywhere that interests you, and it will follow, and it will also lead the way.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. Can we turn now to the the lesser of the big shifts, although maybe not, that's going on right now? I would really like to talk a lot about Saturn having moved into Pisces. Um, in many ways, is this a paradox, this particular planet and this sign,
I
do you
think
think?
so, yes. They're very different energies, aren't they? But I think this is the thing about astrology. We can become very black or white, all or nothing about placements, and a bit like having some sort of debility in the chart, which I don't believe in anyway. I think every combination has a function. And Saturn is the planet of structure, of limitations, usually for good purpose, if we understand that. And it's a planet linked to control. But in Pisces, we're dealing with an energy that's formless. It's all-embracing. It's free-flowing in that way, highly emotional. And so when they're put together, they seem incompatible. But it's really about having to work with something you feel, I would say, is sort of like a creative structure. Or what I think really is that if you can channel a sense of commitment to some sort of creative or spiritual endeavor, then adapt it into your lifestyle without feeling like it's a big commitment. You see, Saturn tends generally to demand that we commit for life, or we put down the tracks for the next 2-3 years. And Pisces will always try to avoid that. Its energy doesn't want to be trapped. And so my feeling is to sort of set up a structure that allows you to have a day a week running, whether it's going to dance class or running an art class or learning to sing or to do something highly creative or spiritual, some sort of spiritual discipline, but to lose yourself in the process and not feel like I have to do it. It's a new regimen. It's a New Year's resolution. So in a way, it's sort of losing yourself in the creative process, allowing time for it, but not being totally rigid about your commitment. And I think that's probably one of the ways to navigate this interesting energy.
That's a really healthy. Oh, I'm so sorry. My computer is making noises I don't want it to. Um, that's a really healthy way to approach this, it seems to me. What about boundaries, about taking control of Feeling things from other people, those who get overrun by, the world being too much for them. Is there some kind of
Mm.
potential with that as well?
Yes, I think so. I mean, uh, they're both connected to causes. Saturn and Pisces. Pisces feels the grief, the longing, the collective longing, the pain that we all suffer. It's attuned to that. And Saturn is also being aware of hardship, of other people's difficulties. I think one of the great things we can show during this time is compassion and understanding to others, even if they drive us crazy, even if we don't agree with their politics or whatever it may be. It's super important to understand that everybody's going through some sort of battle, some sort of suffering. And what I've been saying to some of my clients recently, and to my students too, is if you can find a way to dedicate yourself in a Saturn way to some sort of service or devotion, if you can find a group of people or just a little corner of society where you can give freely of your time and your compassion, um, and uh, and do so if you can in some way over the next few years. Make that become part of your existence, to make somebody else's life or a group's life better in some way. But the key always with the Saturn in Pisces is not to become a victim of your own commitment, because often we think of Pisces sometimes as the victim or the martyr. They give so much, and all of a sudden they've lost themselves in the process. They become the victim of some structure or commitment that they've wanted to help out originally, or sort out a guru who ends up making them feel used and abused. So it's about, in some way, being of service, but not losing yourself. And as I've said to clients recently, actually, by doing that, finding something that you can give yourself with compassion unconditionally, you'll find yourself in that process rather than losing yourself. But you do need a little bit of boundary and containment and not be engulfed by it all, if that makes some sense anyway.
Well, right, because the one extreme experience of this could be feeling completely overwhelmed by the needs of everybody around you or the
That's
world,
right.
like
Yeah.
not being able to listen to the news without falling apart, kind of thing.
Well, it's probably a good idea, actually, to distance yourself from the influx of chaos and drama around us and listen to our hearts, listen to the people in front of us, listen to the voices of the people that we love, rather than be overwhelmed by the anxiety that's in the air, or the panic, or the sense of difficulty or crisis of what might happen. And I think there's something about that nature of Pisces that says, que sera, sera, whatever will be, will be. That sense of let's just go with it. We're not just, what do they say, a drop in the ocean, but also an ocean in a drop. I think
Hmm.
what we learn from Pisces, and maybe this is what the learning process of Saturn will be for the next 3 years, is that everything is of consequence, but ultimately everything is inconsequential. It's just a drop in the ocean. And if we can play with that paradox and not get too sucked up in the drama of what may be, and focus on what feels right for us, and be around the people that really are nurturing and healing us, then I don't think we can go wrong, or at least we can't start off in the wrong direction.
Well, have you thought about the role that various forms of escapism might play? And I'm thinking specifically of drinking and drugging or succumbing to
Yeah.
that.
Well, um, I think there may be more boundaries. Certainly,
Hmm.
Saturn, when it moves through a sign, speaks of certain societal limitations. There may be new laws that come up. We may be seeing that in the news. But I think if you've got a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning in your life, and that's often through service to something larger than yourself, then the need to transcend in unhealthy ways often disappears, or it dissipates at least.
That's beautifully put. Thank you. One thing I've been wondering about, and I wonder if you've looked at it from this way. There is a group of people who were born in 1965 to 68, 69, who have Uranus and Pluto conjunct. Have you thought about what Saturn moving into an opposition with that conjunction in Uranus, I'm sorry, in Virgo, might be down the line for this group of people?
That's a good question. I haven't thought about that, actually. I'm sure I will be forced to think about that
Yeah,
pretty
because I
soon.
suspect your clients will be coming with it. Uh,
That's right. And you see, I think it's an interesting generation, the Pluto and the Uranus in Virgo generation,
mhm.
particularly when they were together in the mid-60s, because not only are they being born into a time of tremendous revolution and social speeded up change, but also that seed is going to become, they are the leaders of today and the leaders of the future. And so it's always interesting to see how that develops. I think Saturn in some way will remind them, and oppositions in the chart often speak about how we're being given a very different view from where we normally go, or from the other side of the zodiac, we're seeing something different. I think that generation were taught that work, data, information is paramount, is king. Health, medication, all of those things, and that it's the generation of the workaholic, really, that's developed from the mid-60s. And they bought the idea, and this may be a little bit controversial, I think they bought into the idea that you work until you drop. And perhaps a Saturn in Pisces opposing that is saying you can do things differently. You don't have to get to 60 years old, which they will be, obviously, in a year or two. Don't have to get to there always thinking about the security that Virgo craves, the systems, the assurances, and maybe the Saturn will test that boundary. I think we're already seeing that a bit in France with people protesting against the change of retirement and pensions. And that's one of the things I always felt that Neptune in Pisces would do. It would dissolve the age of retirement, and that idea of, well, you just keep going and we'll use you in any capacity. And maybe the Saturn in Pisces is saying there's a different way. You don't have to sacrifice yourself to society. You don't have to sacrifice your life to work, where you retire and then you're dead within a few years. What I always say to my clients is, if you're going to retire, don't retire from life, just retire from work. And retiring from life is the biggest problem people have. They seem to think, well, I'm too old, I'll just sit in my garden shed and I'll do something. And that's absolutely fine if they're enjoying that. But so often people give up their passion, and you need to replace it with something. If you're going to give up your work, which has been a passion, perhaps, if you find something else that you can do. So my feeling is it's probably going to be a good reminder of mortality, in the sense that we have limited time, and therefore going after what you really want and what feels meaningful to you is going to be the key, rather than just staying on that hamster wheel that I think that generation has been on for many, many years. What's your thought?
Well, thank you for asking. I have several thoughts on this. The first is that this opposition is following on Pluto in Capricorns having trined that Uranus and Pluto placement. So there's been already a lot of deep issues coming up. I've observed this in people of taking action based on deaths that they're seeing around you, them, and saying, oops, I have X amount of time and I want to do something different with it. I have seen this in inspire dazzling creative productivity in some people as a consequence. And it seems to me, I've always looked at that Uranus Pluto conjunction as a signature for being change agents. So with Saturn moving into the opposition, it seems to me there is a checkpoint of, okay, what have you done with it? Have you stepped into, what have you taken command of? Have you been acting responsibly? Is there something you've actually done with yourself? I think there will be the next level of productivity coming out of these people, but it might have much more of a world and service-oriented impact with the Virgo part coming through, rather than I'm going to sit here and, reorganize my office kind of vibe.
Well, I know, I can hear that. Probably it's a bit of both, I imagine. But that's really interesting. I had a email recently from somebody who'd read. I wrote a chapter in one of my books called Pluto and it was Pluto and the History of America, something like that. Looking at Pluto's cycle, looking at how this was written back in 2014 in a book called Horoscope Snapshots, and this gentleman emailed me and said, "Do you have a copy of that?" And so I sent him the chapter instead of the book. I should have said to him, buy the book, but anyway, I sent him the chapter, and he wrote back and was fascinated because it was talking about 2020 and all the different things that have gone on since, to some extent. And he said, "So is there going to be a great hero that comes and rescues us? Are we going to be nuked?" His line of questions afterwards had me wondering what he'd read. I was really taken aback. And I thought often what we want is for some politician or some structure to come along and rescue us. And then we get terribly disappointed with them, tear them apart when they can't do it. And I think that axis of Virgo and Pisces, that polarity of those two signs, is that I want to find somebody who can rescue us, to be of service, to look after us, when really the reality is we all need to be part of that ourselves. We all need to be individually responsible for our little square corner of the universe, in a way, and expecting somebody to come in and to find the way. It's a bit like expecting the world to end on a particular date or aliens to land last Thursday. This is a gradual thing of responsibility rather than one person coming in and changing. So maybe that the Saturn in Pisces has something about growing up or facing that reality that we have to be, as you say, the change agents, the agents of our own transformation, as they say, to be the change that we want to see in the world.
That sounds like a natural and organic outgrowth of some of the Saturn in Aquarius. It's actually Capricorn and then Aquarius message of, well, Saturn and Capricorn particularly, of rewriting your priorities and stripping life down to what is most essential and putting your own well-being at the forefront. And this seems like an outgrowth of that, of your own well-being there affects everybody else's well-being. And at any rate, and I can see parallels in many of the recent outer planet transits, and also Pluto in Aquarius, taking small groups banding together and taking responsibility rather than looking for a huge entrenched outer force to handle everything. So, as always with astrology, if there's a message, it comes through in multiple ways in multiple directions. Seems to me. So, end of lecture. This might be a really appropriate time to take our first and only actually break. So hang on, everybody. We'll continue with this in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to Celestial Compass. We are talking today with astrologer and author Frank Clifford, and we've been talking a lot about Saturn in Pisces. And I was wondering if you have any thoughts about what this might mean collectively. You've been discussing ways individuals might navigate this energy, but what do you think this means for society at large?
Well, hi, Kathy. Yes, that's an interesting one, isn't it? I think after 5 years, or 6 years really, of Saturn in its own signs of Capricorn and Aquarius, we're starting to feel a little bit more able to navigate different types of waters. I think Saturn has felt restrictive for a lot of people. So my feeling is the invitation, and I like to think of these ingresses, these transits as invitations, is to hopefully show a little bit more kindness to each other as societies, to be able to find common links. I don't want to sound cynical here or too Saturnian myself, but often people talk about these changes as being new spiritual insights, or there's going to be great awakenings. Again, I think that these start on a personal level. They don't really manifest globally or on a societal level until we've come together individually or in smaller groups. So the promise of us being more enlightened when Neptune moved into Pisces all those years ago, well, there are opportunities and invitations, but as we can see, the world still faces a lot of issues. So maybe it's about reconnecting with that all-encompassing, softer spirit of kindness to each other that I would like to see. I'm not sure if I'd bet on it quite yet in terms of what we see in society, but I'd like to think that we showed more insight and compassion. Yeah.
I'm wondering personally, when Saturn first changes signs, often you see a kind of an overload of the burdensome or obligation or heavy end of expression. And I'm wondering if the uh, outburst, flurry, not just in the United States, but in other countries of legislation targeting less protected members of society, um, women, but particularly transgender and LGBTQ people. I think there's an African country, I believe Uganda, that's just outlawed homosexuality. I'm wondering if this is the going overboard of government attempting to clamp down on or hinder people who are generally victimized. Just a
Yes,
thought.
I think Pisces speaks of the disenfranchised. It speaks of the people that are forgotten, or the people that have to really work hard to obtain equal rights. I always think of Pisces as the survivor of the zodiac. I call it the rest cures religion and pills sign from the song, because when you look at people with strong Pisces in their chart, they've been through everything, and yet they're still here. They're still able to function. There's a tremendous strength that I think goes unrecognized in the sign. And my feeling is that the outlaws and the clampdowns and the nonsense that people agree to or allow to happen during these times, I think we're talking about that shift from Pluto and Capricorn to Aquarius as well. I often say it has to get so bad that we want to do something about it. If it's slowly integrated into society, or it becomes in a very subtle way a restriction, and there's not much fanfare, or it's done with half manipulation, whatever, we don't tend to notice it much. The idea of spin has been around for many, many years, but I think when Uranus moved into Pisces, we had the real sense of being spun by government policies and different things like that, or just being deceived with fake news, etc., and all of that. So my feeling is that it's going to have to get so loud and difficult in the coming 18 months as Pluto goes back and forth into Aquarius, back into Capricorn, that we're going to have to see very starkly what is right and what's wrong. And astrology is one of those amazing subjects, as you know, Kathy, that it reminds us how alike we are, how more alike we are than we're unalike. And you meet students at the very beginning of their studies and they say, I'll never date another moon in Cancer, or I'll never go out with another guy with Venus in Scorpio, whatever it may be. And then we realize, of course, that the people that we admire, the people we learn from, have those placements too. And we recognize that we all have these remarkable 12 archetypes of the signs in us and around us. And to be prejudiced against one corner of society or 1/12 of the population on a particular sign feels very narrow. And astrology teaches us that whatever we might think of somebody, whether they're president of the US or prime minister somewhere, most of them are actually being their chart. And it's a reminder of the 1,001 ways we can express ourselves. So it sort of opens the door for more compassion, I think, when we learn astrology and realize that people aren't simple stereotypes or good or bad. There's a whole spectrum of possibility. Maybe that's going off topic a little bit, but I think we tend to project our anger or frustrations in ourselves, or the unacceptable in ourselves, onto the people. Maybe the Saturn in Pisces is reminding us that we have to leave that door open a little bit.
As you're saying this, I'm thinking of two films, how's that for Pisces, that actually are lessons in this. They're from, I think, the 80s, Jean de Florette and Manon of the Spring, and it's about a man and his wife who are trying to get a well on their land, and the man who lives next door just does horrible, horrible things to them to prevent them from getting access to the water, and he basically ends up destroying the young man, and then learns, of course, the young man is his son.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there are all kinds of messages of actually what you're railing against really strongly, you're related to. So I think that's a really
Yes.
good thing to keep in mind with this. Thank you for making that point.
Well,
Um,
it's the interconnectedness of Pisces as well that's so important. We know that if we harm something outside of us, it's really part of us too. And the idea of directing your frustration out to a particular group or denying them the right to be who they are is is really a reflection of the contempt you may feel for yourself, or what you allow into your own inner circle, in a way. But it's a fascinating time where we're on the verge of that idea of cancel culture that's so prevalent in England, where I'm calling you from, and obviously in various parts of the world. And what it leaves out is the opportunity to dialogue. In recent months, I've been watching a lot of videos on YouTube, a lot of news from people. Sometimes they say outrageous things, but I'm fascinated because I want to keep in the dialogue. I want to keep in the conversation. And I think that's what we owe to each other, is to keep connected in some way, even if I don't agree with who you are or what you're trying to impose or whatever it may be, from whatever angle. Things have been so divided now, probably since maybe 6-7 years in a way. The polarity in America was extremely apparent to the outsider like myself, and we have the same in this country. It's probably very apparent to non-Brits. And I guess the key is to keep the door open for conversation, for dialogue.
That's a very positive way of looking at all this. There's one other thing I wanted to ask you about, but before I do, Anything else? Any other thoughts on Saturn in Pisces that you care to impart?
Well, one of the things I've been saying to students is, with Saturn in Pisces, don't work for results, like the end result. Work for creating something in that moment. And if you do that, you'll end up with achieving results, but you're not aiming for something at the end of the day. Pisces reminds us, and so does the next sign, Aries, to live in the moment, to be aware of how you feel, how you're connected in that moment. And planning, I'm going to be aiming for this in 5 years, or I'm giving this up now in order to look forward to my retirement in 5 years, whatever. I don't think that works as much as it used to. And so not working for results, but creating and being in the moment, I think is the key to a level of joy and contentment. So that I think that's what Saturn in Pisces might be teaching us too.
And that opens us to the creativity or the creative inspiration of the moment. When I was younger and actually working in a sort of normal job, I was, I just railed against the notion of uh, 5-year corporate planning because I didn't see any room in it for creativity and um, epiphany. Like, you could be cutting yourself off completely from what the most miraculous development could be if you have this structure that you do not have any wiggle room in. So maybe there's something of that. That's another way of saying, I think, what you've been advocating here.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes.
Um, and since Saturn rules time, I'm very curious. You have a column in the Mountain Astrologer called "Moments in Time," in which you uh, explore astrologically what was going on at a particular moment. And it seems to me they all seem to have an entertainment or arts field related, at least the ones that have caught my attention, vibe to them. Um, how did you, is this just one thing that you do? You see something, you go, I want to know what was happening astrologically at that moment? Um,
I
Personal
think so.
inspiration?
Yes, when you, for example, anything you might read in a book or a newspaper, and it says it happened at 5:53 p.m. We astrologers rush to the ephemeris, we rush to Astro Gold or Solarfire, whatever we use, and we create a chart and we try to find meaning in that moment. And it reminds us that every moment is full of possibility, and your moment may be very different from my moment, depending on how we use it, but it's still the same moment. And so what I found myself doing, and some of them are entertainment, and I've looked at charts every moment from Rosa Parks getting arrested for sitting on the bus to the
Oh,
first ever Oscars to the O.J. Simpson beginning of the trial. I've had all 101 different things so far. I think I'm probably exaggerating. I'm probably on my 30th or 40th of those. And just to me, it's astrology in action. I love the TMA. I've been working for the Mountain Astrologer now for about 14, 15 years. I've written over 100 articles for them on lots of different topics. Luckily, they always seem to be open to what I suggest and what I'm writing. I'm currently doing an edited a special edition that I'm guest editing on film, the astrology of film. That's going to come up in the fall, and I'm fascinated by interesting lives, interesting people, interesting situations. So one of the moments I did a couple of years ago was the moment that Ronald Reagan got sworn in as governor of California back in the 60s. I think it was 1967. And he got sworn in at a very precise moment that
mm-hmm.
everybody thought, okay, he's using an astrologer for this.
Mm-hmm.
So I was intrigued to explain that and have a look at that in that column. So it's been great fun, but it's such a learning process, and it reminds us So sometimes when we do natal astrology, we look at our own birth charts and study our own transits. It can be like navel gazing, going very deep into a sort of Alice in Wonderland hole. When we look at mundane events happening in the world, it reminds us that the qualities are there for any activity. So yes, I'm inspired by uh, anything that's got an astrological quality to it. I did the musical Hair recently, and their opening. I did. Somebody sent me the details of when the Spice Girls got together. I've just had a lot of fun with every type of thing, from politics to crime to entertainment over the years.
This is an approach well, it's funny that to hear you say astrology in action, because that is often the those are often the first three words in posts that I put in my Facebook group when there is an event that is playing out the astrological archetypes or the energies of the week. It's almost like an instructive, hey, look at this. Isn't this cool? Here's how we see it. And the danger is that, of course, people want to discuss the merits of the topic. I'm like, no, no, the astrology is what we're talking about here. It's really quite fun. And this is something I absolutely do. Someone will tell me something, and I'll go, "Where's my ephemeris?" I'm going to look this up. And sometimes it's extraordinary. A few years ago, I was involved in a insane as this sounds, theremin orchestra in Brooklyn that was going to play a piece that had been premiered and played only once before, and I had the premiere date and time, and I knew when we did it, and the parallels were mind-blowing. The same moon. Same thing with the show that I was in, involving the Marx Brothers. In the charts of our opening and the show's Broadway opening were absolutely connected. And I just hear a song that Fred Rogers, who was a 29-degree Pisces sun, used to sing, "Everything goes together because it's all one piece." And it is.
Mm.
So,
Wonderful,
um,
wonderful thought. Yes,
uh,
I found.
oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry. No, no, go ahead.
sorry. No,
You found.
I found a chart that I did. I'm always thinking of new ideas for books, and magazines and all sorts of things. I spend my life. Then I save the chart and make a note of it. And I did a book called "Gonna Live Forever" last fall, and it was a fundraising book based on the 1980s television show Fame and the
Mhm.
film, and we raised a lot of money for Children's Hospice, and I'm very so proud to have written this book in about a 6 or 8 week period. And as I was writing it, I'm thinking, why am I so driven at the moment? I had a deadline, of course, that would do it. And then I found, as I was going through my files, I found it. The original idea I had for this book some 15, 20 years ago, and only finally got around to it last year. And the chart just fit with the transits of what were happening last fall, last summer. And it's a reminder that everything we do, again, that Pisces feeling of being interconnected. So we never stop learning. And I always think of the chart as like a magnet. We get attracted to people and situations at particular moments that really resonate with us. You could think of it in a musical note or some sort of musical bar, or simply a magnet. And we're doing this constantly. And the next time you and I get together, Kathy, there'll be a transit that links to today's conversation, I'm sure.
Mhm.
That's what's so fascinating, endlessly fascinating about this amazing subject that we study.
I agree completely. And I'm hoping there will be another time we get together. Uh, could you talk just a little bit about the moment in time column, about the first performance of Hair?
Oh, yes. Well, I have to think back now. I'm always doing something new. I've just,
Right, I know you wrote it
in what
months
way?
ago.
What would you like to know?
Well, it seems to me it ties to what we've been talking about, because it happened while Uranus and Pluto were conjunct
That's true. Well, let
in
me look it
Virgo.
up as I'm. Yes, it was October the 17th, 1967, about 8:30 in the evening. I'm told. My computer tells me right now, and um, uh, and let's have a look. It was, yes, of course, it was Manhattan. Uh, yes, Uranus Pluto opposite Chiron as well. Uh, what did I have to say about it? I think I
Well,
was.
I recall
Mm,
you
oh,
did
good,
talk
good,
about
yes.
how it came after all of the after the tumultuous events of the 60s. Um, there was anyway, I will let you talk while I look at it.
Well, you might remember more than I do because it's I've moved house since I wrote that, and I've moved 4,000 books and just a huge amount of stuff and research that I have. The Well, I'll have to think about what I wrote, but it was uh, the chart had a Sun in Libra, Gemini rising, and midheaven in Aquarius. So it was very air. Not hair, air. It was very connected to what was going on in society at the time. It also happened at a full moon. And one of the things that I'm always intrigued by is the advice astrologers give to launch something at a new moon. When my astrology pal, Dietrich Pesson, who's based in Massachusetts, she says, never start anything, never launch anything at a new moon because there's not enough light. We don't have enough information yet. And the new moon is fabulous for brainstorming, creating wish lists, etc. But it's not until 7 days later, at the first quarter moon, when the moon looks half full, we can actually take action. So at the full moon, it's at its magnitude that we can launch something. And I've launched over the years parties and events at the full moon. Hair was launched at a full moon. And the thing about that is that it captures the zeitgeist, it captures the imagination. It also can be, full moon can be dramatic. You have a party at a full moon and everybody turns up. People you haven't invited also turn up. People drink too much. People break up long-term relationships on the staircase. There's always drama happening at full moons. We have a law now in England where not a law, but the police send out more cops on the beat at a full moon because they know there's going to be more drinking, more violence, more anger, more tears. So hair being that full moon moment as well probably does speak to how it reflected the youth, the burgeoning power and the growth of that generation that were really finding their voice as well.
And you mentioned that so it has Mercury is the chart ruler because it has Gemini rising, and Mercury was conjunct Neptune
Yes, yes.
at that moment in Scorpio, which is kind of appropriate given what the musical was about. Um,
That's right. I mean, it was provocative, and Scorpio doesn't like BS. When you've got Mercury in Scorpio, you can't do small talk. What you say, it's like a dart. It's going to be aimed in the right place, at the right target, with precision. And maybe the Mercury-Neptune was really talking about the counterculture of the time, the sexual revolution, the opposition to consumerism, encouraging with Mercury-Neptune Eastern philosophies, alternative lifestyles, things that pushed the parents. I think the mid-60s were fascinating because it really, the 50s invented the teenager, the idea of the teenager and being their own group. By the mid-60s, those teenagers were now fully formed adults with ideas of their own, not wanting to play the game that was set up for their parents. And certainly the divide was very obvious. And I think Hare seemed to capture that. It's a little bit before my time. I was born in 73, but I have friends and people that Hare changed their lives, whichever part of the world they saw it in. It really spoke to them as being the beginning of maybe the Gemini ascendant is the beginning of the important questions being asked as well.
And part of why I brought this particular moment in time up is
Mm.
that now with Pluto in Aquarius, you're going to be hearing the signature song from this show, Aquarius Let the Sunshine In. Uh, I'm already hearing it way too much. So there's something about this particular moment in time that could end up being really important, instructive, indicative, symbolic for what we're going on now. And for people to understand, this is in the current issue of the Mountain Astrologer, which is the preeminent astrological magazine, I do believe, on the planet, and well worth your looking into.
I agree. I love what they do, and they have new ownership now, and a different style coming in. And again, it's important to keep things fresh. Yeah.
Absolutely. I did some things for it in the 90s, and I've been a subscriber for a very, very long time,
Right.
and highly recommend it. Um, in the last few minutes, I'm so happy that you have joined us. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your teaching. Can you tell people where they can find you?
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Kathy. Well, I'm online. I do a lot of my work online now with students. I'm taking a bit of a sabbatical from clients at the moment so I can get some other projects finished. I did actually break that and saw a client about an hour ago. It was a long-term client who wanted to see me about particular urgent issues. But you can find me at the LSA, www.londonschoolafastrology.com, and we have all sorts of short courses, long courses, one-offs. Yesterday, if I can say yesterday, because it'll be about a week ago by the time we go on air, but just recently, I'll say, we do lots of freebies. So yesterday I put together an hour on how to write and how to understand sun sign forecasts, because a lot of the students are curious about that. How does it work? How is it different from the natal chart? And then also I did a little bit on electional astrology, which was a freebie that you can go online, you can click on the free folder and watch in your own time with a lot of other articles and videos. We did something on electional, and as you know, Kathy, electional astrology is just fascinating. Learning to pick the right time for a meeting, or to sign a contract, or to get married, that sort of thing. Fascinating.
Well, I thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that we'll have another conversation. And everyone, be safe, be well, and use this energy to your advantage. Talk to you again soon. Bye.